society is not open to functioning differently. I am highly productive, but the way that I do things is just different than the way the typical neurotypical people will do stuff. And, how can I still show up as me in these systems and structures that weren't built they weren't built for us?
Welcome to Divergent Paths, the podcast where we explore unique journeys, neurodivergent experiences, and the ways we can challenge conventional thinking to create a more inclusive world. I'm your host, Dr. Regina McMenemy. I am a doctor, but not that kind of doctor, and this is a podcast, not medical advice. I'm thrilled to welcome Juliana Allen to the show. Juliana is a somatic healing coach, a civil service executive director, and a mom. Juliana shares her story of discovering how her ADHD was linked to many other experiences and complications she experienced throughout her life. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening to Divergent Paths. Is fashion like a special interest of yours? Is this something that was like a persistent interest that caused you kind of to start to shop and have that as part of what you did?
Honestly, no. Isn't that funny? No, it wasn't. I started the boutique. So prior to that, I was in physical therapy, actually.
Oh, okay.
And then I had my first kiddo. And I went shopping 6 weeks postpartum, which,
Oh, wow.
if nobody tells you that is a awful idea.
Bad idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Like whatever. It's not a good idea. And
yeah. Well, your body's still so much in transition at that point. There's so much going on. Like, yeah.
Your hormones and everything, right? And I went shopping, and I remember being in the mall in the dressing room, and I just start crying because I was like, nothing fits, and I feel this way and that way, and like just sitting there crying in the dressing room with my newborn baby. And I just was like, I'm going to make a store that's going to be different. And so a year later, I opened a size and gender clothing boutique, and that's really how that happened.
That's amazing.
Yeah, a lot of ideas, a lot of passions, and that's what stuck at that point in time. So
nice. I mean, we're talking about neurodivergence, and that's definitely one of the things that sort of happens for our, creative and unique brains is some things stick.
Yes.
That might be surprising.
Yeah, it was a wonderful time. I don't have I have very fond memories of that time, and it was honestly really kind of where I found myself and found my voice, it was almost like through trying to empower other people. Like it was really helpful for me to be able to finally figure out who I was and be able to use my voice. So I really am proud of that. Proud of the boutique and the foundation and everything. So it's been closed now for a couple years, which still doesn't feel like it, but it has been.
I know. I still have to remind myself sometimes when I'm in the area and I'm like, oh no, actually, no.
It was time. It was time to close it down. It was for a season. And
we have these messed up ideas of success, right? We have these ideas that things have to persist in order for it to be a success. And that's one of the things I really want people to change their mindsets about. Success isn't one thing. There are many ways to be successful, and that there are times in your life where, I mentioned before we started recording that my old podcast was about video games, and I don't play video games anymore. I don't really do that. But there was a time where it was really important, and it was the big thing, and that podcast was great, and we did a lot, and I think it was a really successful thing that I did. And when I started this podcast, there was a little mourning for me, and I'm not doing that one anymore. That was when I fell in love with podcasting, but now I know, this is the new phase.
It's interesting too. I know we haven't touched on neurodivergence too much yet, but I definitely have ADHD. And, at that point I didn't know that. And so there was this narrative in my head that I was failing
Right.
because I wanted to do something different.
Right. Yeah.
And, I kind of I didn't necessarily lose my passion for it, but it switched.
Right.
And the way that I was passionate about doing it was just not, it wasn't realistic. Right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so there was this whole feeling like a failure, because I like gave up, or I decided I got bored and I quit or something.
Right.
And that was the narrative that I said. And that was the narrative that I heard from other people too. Not everybody, but some people.
But yeah, I mean, there's always critics when you stop doing something or you make choices, for your mental health. Sometimes you're always going to have somebody who's like, but you should be doing this or
Right.
whatnot, or people who still hold that older version of you as who you are. Right.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do. So, so was it through when did you first then start to suspect that you were ADHD or that you were neurodivergent?
I was, well, long story. How much time do we have? No, I'm kidding. So I actually was diagnosed with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, when I was about 10 years old,
Okay.
which we're talking early 90s here.
Right.
And
yeah, that's when girls wouldn't have been diagnosed with ADHD. So.
Right.
Or autism.
And none of that. And, OCD, ADHD, it all kind of falls
It
in
all,
one.
yeah. Yeah. It's all neurodivergence. Yeah.
Yeah. So the ADHD really didn't come out until, I think I was only diagnosed about a year ago, which is fascinating, really. But like in hindsight, I look at my life and I like, oh, that's why, and there's so many of these things because the OCD since I was 10, I struggled for a long time with an eating disorder. And for me, the two were very related because it was,
So control.
Yeah, it was control. And, I feel everything very intensely and very deeply. And like, I didn't have a filter.
Right.
Like I couldn't filter out all the information that was being thrown at me, Sounds familiar.
Very familiar, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like the eating disorder was a really big part of my way to cope with it. And turns out I just had undiagnosed ADHD. And yeah, it's an interesting thought. Like what would have happened if it was a little bit more known back then?
Right.
But,
if they would have understood that the presentations were different, and sometimes they're not. Like there are plenty of, female identified or assigned female birth people who present hyperactive, like classically, quote unquote, hyperactive. But there's also, like, for me, my hyperactivity has never been physically manifested. It has always been in my brain. My brain is very active. And, and that was the difference. And it's hard to see that, right? And it's hard to identify that unless you really do kind of dive in and talk to somebody and kind of get to the root of some of those tendencies.
It's so interesting now how there's all of us in our 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. We're like, turns out.
I know.
Good portion of my inner circles are all
sure.
somewhere on the.
I know. Yes. I have people who are like, but I do that too, and I'm not. And I'm like, hey, babe, I love you, but we're friends.
We tend to find each other.
We tend to just seek each other out.
Yeah, not intentionally. Not somehow.
Intentionally. It's just, you make sense. I know you probably heard. This is not my metaphor, but you're a zebra in a pack of horses, right? So, like, when you're neurodivergent, you're very similar to. In many fashions to a horse, but you're a zebra, so you look a little different, and your size a little different, and your hair's a little weird, or whatever it is, but you're trying to be a horse, and you can't quite be a horse, and you can't quite figure out why running with that pack of horses is not really working for you until you're like, oh, I'm not a horse.
I'm not a horse. I am a zebra, in fact.
I am a zebra, right? And so, like, that idea of the zebras in the pack find each other, right? Because they know, they understand, and, like, they they start to conform to, to each other. They start to, kind of not conform. That's not the right word. They connect with each other based on, on their difference rather than on their performance of trying to look like a horse. So it does make perfect sense.
Yes, it really does. There's almost all my friends. And then I think that's also interesting because like now that I know this, I kind of observe how like my relationships work and how
Yes.
like conversations will go.
Yep.
And having a conversation with a neurotypical human is very different than my close knit group of friends that are all neurodivergent, and we can be having like 20 conversations at one time.
Right. Yep.
And always circle back to it. And it sometimes is a bit challenging to be in close relationship with people that are not neurodivergent because it's not how their brain works. And it's
right. And then things that you think, at least this is my experience, things that were normal and supportive. Like I would always, it was years before I learned that for neurotypical or neuronormative, people, it's rude to tell a story of your own in response to their story. Like the what? like I can tell you exactly how the same thing has impacted me.
I still don't think that's rude.
I still don't think it's rude either. Yes.
No, because it shows, let me just tell you, it shows compassion and it shows empathy. And
exactly.
It's like, I can understand where you are coming from.
Yes.
So I am going to fight that one because I don't think that's true.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I am a little more mindful of it now, where I will often say, is it okay if I share a story?
Yes.
Especially if it's somebody who I don't have a really strong rapport with. Like with my close friends, like none of us do that because we all know.
Yeah.
We know exactly what we're doing, and we've had this discussion about like, oh, there are a subset of people who think that this is, rude or, centering yourself in the conversation. So we've already had those conversations. But when I'm talking with someone who isn't that, I don't have that rapport with, I will check in and say, I'm hearing some similarities to my life. Do you want to hear a story that might relate to it? Or are you looking for a different kind of feedback? Like, to take a step to center what they might need in the conversation versus what is easy for me to just kind of like present to them.
That's a really good idea, actually. Good job.
Thanks.
Oh yeah, maybe I should do that too. Nice work.
I mean, it's just it took fumbling. It took, I have lost neurotypical friends, like because of how I present and how I work. So, I'm getting to that after.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like, trying to fit in places that are not designed for neurodivergent people, it's really exhausting and an interesting thing, to try to like, okay, I'm supposed to ask these questions. I'm not supposed to do this. Okay, be quiet.
Right.
Like, don't interrupt you. And like
Right.
those kind of things. It takes a lot of more mental energy to be able to like conform yourself almost.
Exactly.
And then, it's frustrating.
Yeah, that's we did an episode recently about masking, and that's largely the effect that masking has on me. Masking is a very draining experience. I talked in that episode about how when I first was diagnosed, I didn't think I masked at all. And then I started to realize there was only the mask in many ways. And that to get to who I really was, I had to kind of strip away layers that I had like built up in terms of protection.
Yeah, that's hard too, because it's like having a brain that doesn't work typically. It's like I think in general, most of us weren't taught how to understand who we really are.
No.
And so we put the mask on and we conform to what we're supposed to be. And it's hard. It's hard to figure out, like, okay, well, who am I underneath that mask? Like,
right. Yeah.
it's takes definitely some time and figuring.
Did you have big revelations? Did you have big things that sort of came out of your unmasking or
That is a
neurodivergence?
lovely way to put that. Yeah. So I was super disconnected from my body, right?
Well, I
Like,
imagine with the OCD and the eating disorder, those are processes of disconnection, right? Both of them are taking you away from your
yes.
somatic experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was just very, I was a talking head walking around, having no idea what my body was actually saying to me. And, after I had my second kiddo, May 2020, which I feel like is enough said,
Wow.
just in and of itself, don't have a child
Wow.
at the beginning of a pandemic, right? Like, don't do that.
No.
If you want your entire world to unravel, have a kid in
Have
the
an
pandemic.
infant in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, yes.
Yeah. It's a super
Oh.
great time. But yeah, everything started to really unravel then. And it got to the point where I could not hold it in anymore. I could not mask anymore. Like, there was too much stress with the business, with the nonprofit that I had, with my then partner and my kids. And it all just started to like unravel. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, my body is screaming at me. And I can't talk myself out of it.
Right. Yeah.
The amount of talk therapy I did, it's just like, I was like, I have done 25 years of talk therapy. Why don't I feel better?
Well, when you do talk therapy and you're high masking, you're performing therapy. You're
I
not.
was so good at it.
I was so good at it too, man.
I got like an A+. Yeah.
A+.
And then I'd be so frustrated. I was like, why don't I feel better? Like, I still want to curl up and just really just stay there.
Yes.
Just stay there.
Yep.
And, it wasn't until I found like somatic therapy that I was like, oh,
right.
I have a body and it tells me things.
Right. Yeah.
And I was so scared to be in the body.
Yes.
Because I didn't want to hear what I like knew it was going to tell me, right? Like, there's always these things you're like, I know it's in there, but I am going to talk my way through it. I'm going to put on a mask. I'm going to be exactly who I was taught I was supposed to be. But then everything falls apart.
Right.
Like, I'm so thankful everything fell apart, but it was a come to Jesus kind of moment, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it.
I mean, that's that is a perfect description, like, in terms of like a cultural ideology, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, what is real here? What is real? What do I need to step away from? What do I need to have as my big moments of understanding and breaking through, who I am?
Yeah. And I think, like, as people identifying as women, like, we are taught to, like, you get in your box, you smile in that box, and you don't come out of that.
Right.
And neurodivergence, like, it is literally impossible for us to be in boxes, but that's what we're supposed to be doing. And when that starts to really come through, it's pretty big.
Yeah, it's a revolutionary thing. The number of relationships I have lost, the changes that have happened in my life, the changes I had to make to my work life are all they were all completely unexpected and came directly out of the diagnosis. And my relationship with my body changed when I went on the ADHD medications, because I had never had a regulated nervous system. And
oh my gosh, when I first started meds for the ADHD, I was like, what? Like, this is how people feel? Are you kidding me?
Are you kidding? Are you serious?
Spent 40 years
Yeah.
Like, and so you
Yeah.
mean to tell me that other people don't feel the need to, like, it's just,
Yeah. Yep. I know. It's shockingly, it's a shockingly different life. Having that regulation and then starting to notice, and that's what the last year in part has been for me, is starting to notice the things that upset my nervous system. Because when you're living in a state of dysregulation constantly, there's no way to know what's setting you off, right? Because you can't take that information in, right?
No.
When you're constantly off, you can't take that information in. So then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I stopped drinking caffeine. I stopped drinking alcohol, not entirely, but
mostly.
mostly.
Yeah. Same, actually.
Primarily. I started noticing the foods that were better for me to eat and foods that were not, foods that, activated certain responses in my body that I wouldn't have picked up on before I had the medication, because I just, they just weren't there. Or they were there, but I couldn't hear them. Like, that's what I said. Like, once I started the medication, my ADHD is still there. I still have a bevy of squirrels that, bounce around in my brain constantly. But now I can actually order them and can say, okay, you are the squirrel that needs attention right now versus whatever just decided to bubble to the top.
So I have I call it a typical job, right? Like, I go into an office and I do things, right? Like, I have a typical job right now. And before I started ADHD meds, I was dying. Like, I was dying. And then guess what? I started meds and I made a list. And then I did the list in the order that I needed to do the list.
Right. You
and
could prioritize.
I said this to one of my coworkers, and they were like, yeah, that's what people
You're
do.
supposed to do.
Isn't that peculiar?
Not amazing. Which and that's one of the things that is, that I love and find frustrating about being neurodivergent, is that back and forth of, like, I love that I can see so many things at once. I can see so many possibilities. I can see so many opportunities and so many things that can be done. But at the same time, that is also a constant sense of overwhelm, right? Like, there are so many possibilities and so many paths and so many roads that, like, being able to focus down a little more on that is really a beautiful thing, because I have such an array of options, right? And then I can just choose, instead of feeling that overwhelming sensation that I needed to do all of the things. I don't feel like I need to do all of the things anymore. And that's a huge shift.
Yeah, same here. It's, just the understanding of this is who I am.
Right.
And, not attaching any judgment to it, not attaching any shame to it, but just being like, this is the way my brain works.
Yep.
And this is what I need in order to be my most authentic self.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's also so much stigma around meds, and that bothers me too. Because, so I mentioned the obsessive compulsive disorder. Like, meds completely changed my life, like, almost instantly. It was the same with the ADHD meds, where it was like, it didn't take it away, but it was that little switch for me that was like, oh,
okay.
That's irrational. Like,
right.
I don't have to wash my hands 20 times. I got it. I can wash my hands one time, and that's okay.
Right.
And it was a very similar experience with the ADHD meds, where it was like, very quick, like, and it didn't take away any of who I am. I think that was a fear of mine too. I was like, I like who I am. I think I'm fun. I can, like, do all the things, or none of the things too. So it was, big advocate for it, for sure. And I
I am
Everyone's
too. I am
yeah.
too. And when I went in to talk to my primary care physician after I had my diagnosis, because I didn't go through her to get diagnosed. I had the kind of insurance, I had the privilege to have the kind of insurance that I could just go to the assessment office and get the assessment done and go through all that on my own, because I was almost positive I was 48 when I'm like, okay, I need to get diagnosed. And I had my assessment done a few days after my 49th birthday. So like right after I turned 49, I had my assessment. And I knew that walking into my primary care physician's office, who I was positive didn't have a deep understanding of ADHD. In fact, she still calls it ADD. So like, I know that because she still refers to it as ADD. And I'm like, that's cute, but we all get the H some way or another. Everybody's H. But yeah. I knew that it was like unlikely that she had any deep understanding of ADHD. And so when I brought in the report that had been verified by 3 different psychologists and had, all of the details, and I'd sent it to her, and she was, she read through it and all this. And the first thing she said to me is, well, not all adults with ADHD need to be medicated. And I was like, great, but let's look at my life. Okay, I'm 49. I am in a high level administration position at a university. I'm a mom. I am XYZ, and I am suffering in every aspect of my life right now. Every aspect of my life is a struggle. And I think it has to do with me being undiagnosed for my entire life and unmedicated for, almost 50 years. So, this is a long time. Because had I gone into her with all of that success, because when I walked into my assessment, the psychologist was like, I can't wait to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, why? And he said, well, it's not usual for us to get someone your age with your success who has not been diagnosed, like you being undiagnosed with multiple college degrees, with a high level career, like most people with the level of ADHD you have would have fallen apart earlier than this. so I was like, oh, okay, great.
I'm not really sure how to take that. Thank you, I think.
Thank you, I think. I'm not sure what this is supposed to be, but he, and he's like, imagine if you'd had the support. Imagine if you had the support that goes with the diagnosis. And I was like, that was reaffirming for me to get the diagnosis, because it means it's going to be easier road for my child, right? Like we know, we're clear, we understand, so.
Yeah. I've done a lot of things too. And it's like, I don't like how that is used as, that's an interesting
a proof
thing.
a proof of neurotypical or neuronormative behavior, right? I can do plenty with it, right?
Totally. Right. It's like, I can do it, but that doesn't mean that it's like my job, right? Like I can do it.
Right. Yeah.
Was I miserable? Yes.
Was I playing on hard mode? Was I, yeah.
Did I feel like a total failure half the time? Yes, because it was, I don't like that.
No, I know. I was like, wow. At the first I was like, oh, well, that's, I did do all that with all this. And then I was like, this really probably wasn't the best way to introduce me to the fact that I had ADHD.
Oh, the medical field.
Might have been a little gentler about this.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, but I'm still glad that I got it. But at the same time, I'm like, well, yeah, this could have been presented differently.
Yeah, the person that evaluated me for my ADHD, I had known because I had done therapy with them like years prior, and they said, like, the first thing they said to me was, "Oh, I thought you already were diagnosed."
Right?
Like, yeah. Lord, people.
Like, yep. I was posting TikToks, and I posted a TikTok right after, and I was crying because somebody on Threads recently asked, "What did you feel when you got your late diagnosis?" And I said, relieved grief. Like, Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was relieved to have it, but I also was grieving because I was so sad. And I recorded a TikTok video of myself crying in the parking lot right after I got the diagnosis. And like 3 of my friends who saw that messaged me and were like, you didn't know?
I know. I was like, can one person act surprised? Like one person in my
Right.
life. That'd be
Yeah,
super
exactly.
cool.
Yeah.
No,
No, and everybody's like, "Oh, I
none
thought
of
you
them
knew
did.
already."
I
It's
know.
like, "No,
That
thanks."
was that same thing where it's like, I thank you, I think.
Right.
Maybe thank you, maybe not. I'm
Right,
not sure.
exactly. At the same time, I'm like, "Why wouldn't you?" Well, I guess, like, telling somebody, you don't wanna, like, tell somebody because I have told people, I'm like, "Hey, this is
That's
you too."
true.
And they
Right.
don't unless they've gotten there on their own, they don't really take to it.
Also valid. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. Cause that, yeah. Cause like my entire circle, of course, we all have ADHD,
Mhm.
like, duh. But some of
Right,
them don't know it. So that's
right.
okay.
Yeah, exactly, and it's people will either find their way or not, and they'll live on hard mode, their whole life, and that's not my responsibility to alleviate that from them, but
Yeah.
I want them to understand, but I also know
Yeah.
that they're on their own path,
Yes, they
you know?
are. That's
Yeah,
for sure. And yeah, it's everyone, and yeah, we're all grown ups. So we can make our own choices for sure. But it's like,
yeah,
hey, did you know that your brain can actually like focus on like one thing, the
right,
priority thing? It's
exactly.
fascinating.
It's
Huh, who
fascinating,
knew?
you have this opportunity, there is this capability for you, so
Yes,
yeah.
yes, indeed.
Do you think there are still challenges though that you end up facing, right? With even diagnosed, or even diagnosed and even medicated, there are still challenges that you face?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's the masking. Like,
Mhm.
society is not super open, I guess, to functioning differently.
Mm,
Like, I am highly productive, right? I
right.
am
Yep.
medicated or unmedicated, even
Yep.
like I can be very productive, but the way that I do things is just different
Yes.
than the way the typical neurotypical people will do stuff. And I love looking at systems and structures. Like, what's my current like boop? How are we going to look at all this? And patterns. And it's like, how can we support people better overall in the system, in the structures, when they aren't like fitting in that little box that we need them to
Right.
fit in? And it's obviously more questions than answers on that, but I think that that's been an area of struggle for me, because like with the work that I currently do, it's a lot of like politics and government,
Mm.
and
Very
I do
rigid
not.
structures. Very rigid structures.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm sitting in these meetings and I'm like, how on earth do people fit into these boxes? And I'm there. I'm
Right.
there, but it's a weird thing, because I would bet that there are a lot more people like me.
Mhm.
Um, and I think we need more people like myself in these kind of,
Agreed.
government roles at this point in our life. But you don't fit easily, and so it's trying to like work through that. And
Yep.
how can I still show up as me
Yep.
in these systems and structures that weren't built for they weren't built for us, like.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and they're
And yeah,
they're not built for a lot of people. They're built to be
they're
structures,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I have a good friend of mine. She's like, it's working exactly how it was designed to work.
Yes,
Like, it's not
exactly.
broken. How do we move forward? Which I think a
Mhm.
lot of us are asking in general right now. So.
Yeah, I think those are big questions that plague a lot of us, and those of us that are neurodivergent, because we can see that big picture in a way that
Mhm.
a lot of people can't or
Mhm.
choose not to. Um, it makes that even harder, right? It makes looking at those structures and the damage that they're doing to so many people even
Yeah.
harder. It makes the world hard. The world is hard right
Mhm.
now. It is a
Yeah.
difficult place to be. So
Yeah.
that's definitely part and parcel of what this journey feels like.
Right. Yeah. I don't know where to take that either.
Yeah.
It's the systems and the structures aren't built for neurodivergence. They're not built for, it's just really anybody other than one group of people. And
right. Any
like, how
difference
do
at
we,
all, and
any difference at all?
any difference at all is not
Yeah.
supported. Yeah. Yeah.
No, and it's really interesting when, like, because I'm, I'm at these meetings, and I'm just like looking around, and I'm just, it's fascinating, really, just how everybody like lines up and does the thing they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm over here just like, what if we didn't do that?
Right.
What if we? Yeah, I don't know. I like to push a little bit,
Yeah, I do too. And I have
Mm-hmm.
been, I don't play politics well. It's one of the reasons why I didn't really do very well in higher ed because I don't play the politics, and I
Yeah.
don't, and now I know that I'm likely autistic, and
Mm-hmm.
I just miss those social structures. I didn't understand that I went from, the main campus of my university to an outreach, a smaller campus. And I didn't understand that the person who gave me my job at the smaller campus wanted to be my dissertation chair, because she never said it, right? She didn't communicate it
Well,
to
she
me
didn't
in
tell me. Yeah.
anyway. I didn't know, I didn't pick up on like these
Mhm.
breadcrumbs that had been left for me. And so I didn't pick her as my chair. I picked somebody else who had a more established reputation in and around the
Right.
areas that I was writing about. And I didn't do that to affront her. I
Right.
just, I didn't know. And then when somebody else came in and they're like, oh, well, yeah, well, she expected to work with you and then didn't. So that's why I got shafted on jobs from then on, because
Yeah.
this unmet expectation had happened and I had no idea. And, it's things like that. I didn't pick up on any of that stuff. And she was probably neurodivergent as well. And, but stronger at playing in the system, because there are people
Yeah.
who can adapt more to the systems and then continue to support them. Right. And I'm just like, I want to go in with a sledgehammer and I want to break all the walls down, and I want to see what I want, the rubble, and I want to like
Yeah.
rebuild
Same.
something. Right.
Same. Yeah. 100%. 100%. And yeah. So and then there's the flip side of it, right? Where it's like, oh, need a job, have to
Right.
support my kids. And
Yeah.
so
You still have to work within it. Like it's I
yeah,
don't know. It's tricky.
damn systems.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
Right. I like
yeah.
systems to be flexible, which is, very much a neurodivergent thing.
And that's not like, I didn't understand that people didn't
Mhm.
think that way until I
Right.
got in it. And I was like, oh, you like it like this. Like, you like it to
Mhm.
be rigid and like,
Hard
boop,
and
boop, boop,
difficult.
boop. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No flexibility,
And
no flow.
confining. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't
Hmm.
want things to be confining. I want things to be open. And that is
Same.
not that is not a thing.
Yeah.
So
So,
with your
yeah.
sort of later diagnosis and
Yeah.
coming to this part of your journey late in life, if you were to be
Mhm.
able to talk to your younger self, what might you say to your younger self that isn't, hey, you have
Mhm.
ADHD, but is like some reassurance you might give your younger
I
self?
would I would tell her there's nothing wrong with her, and that just like her brain is different, but that's nothing wrong with it. Like, I have a almost 8-year old who has ADHD also, and I can see it in him where, like, I know he wants to fit in,
Right.
and I mean he knows that he doesn't, right? Because his brain works
Right.
different.
Yep.
And, it's like, I just want that younger version of me and also my children to know that it's like, just because you're different doesn't mean something's wrong. And that can cross so many different areas of life,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Right.
I don't, it doesn't matter how you stray from this picture of what you're supposed to be. You're different.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with you. And that's what I would wanted to tell tell younger me, because I remember being in kindergarten, and I cried every single day in school.
Oh.
Every single day, because I was so sensitive, and like somebody would get hurt on the playground and it, knocked me over for the rest of the day, and I couldn't focus. And I remember there was one little boy who got hurt, and my mom still tells me the story. She's like, "You made me call his mom that night to make sure he was okay."
Oh.
Yeah. It's just like everything just came at me, right? There was
there's no filter. There's no, you feel all the feelings. Yeah.
Everything. And if you're feeling it, I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
And it can be a lot. So I would, I think just a lot of reassurance that, we're all different, but we're all great just the way we are, and
absolutely. We all have so much to offer. Yeah.
Break the box. Break the box.
Yes, exactly. Take that sledgehammer out. Break down those walls. I
think that's where I love patterns and love all that stuff. And it's like, there's just, with how many of us have had these later in life realizations on multiple different things, I see a switch happening. I see a
big change.
Yeah.
It's coming for sure. Yep. Beautiful. Well, thank you for chatting with me. I really appreciate it. Where can our listeners find you if they want to learn more about you?
Instagram, and for now TikTok, as long as it's still here. Instagram's the best place though, and I'm on there as Reclaim with Juliana.
Nice.
That's my Instagram. Yep.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. Wow, that was such a great conversation. Many thanks to Juliana for joining me on the show today and sharing her story full of joy and empowerment through her diagnosis. Please follow Juliana on Instagram at Reclaim with Juliana, all one word. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen, like and leave a review, and share with your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Divergent Paths Consulting, no spaces. And until next time, stay spicy.